Great, thank you. So yes, welcome to this session about self-reliant groups and how churches can help and support self-reliant groups and get them going in your areas. So my name's Felicity. I work for Church Action on Poverty, and I've been working with self-reliant groups for about a year now, which has been really great. I think they're a really wonderful project. And I'm joined today by some colleagues from a partner organisation called Purple Shoots, who work with lots of self-reliant groups, particularly in South Wales and the southwest of England, but also other parts of the country. So I'm going to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Should we go first? So I'm Karen Davies. I'm the founder of Purple Shoots, and yeah, that's me. I don't know what else to say. Yeah, I started it, but it's 10 years old now, so there's loads of other people involved now.
Hi, I'm Emma Musgrave. I work with Karen at Purple Shoots, and I oversee most of our self-reliant group work.
Hi, I'm Joyce Kay. I've been working with Purple Shoots since February, and before that I worked with Church Action on Poverty with self-reliant groups.
Hi, I'm Helen Locke, and I've been working with Purple Shoots since October, and I've run 2 groups so far, so very new but all very exciting.
Great. And it would be great to get a sense of who's here and who's in this session. So if you want to pop in the chat box who you are, where you're joining from, and if you're involved in a church, what that church is, and maybe what your role is in that church. Are you the vicar? Are you a member of the congregation? That kind of thing. Be great to get a sense of who's joining us today. So yeah, the chat function at the bottom of the screen. Hi, Naomi from Essex. Hello, Nikki. And Charlotte. Oh, great. Lots of you joining. Fab. Okay, while we do that, I'd like to hand over to, who's going first? Is it Charlotte? Are you going to talk to us for a bit about why SRGs are important, particularly in the context of churches?
Yeah, of course. Hello everyone, my name is Charlotte. I'm the vicar at St Catherine's Church in Pontypridd, which is directly opposite the Purple Shoots office. So we get to wave outside the windows to each other. It's fabulous. Before we start, would anybody object if I started with a prayer? Fabulous, let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you that you are such a good God and such a good Father for us all. Come, Holy Spirit, and rest on each of us now. Even though that we are not together in the same room, our hearts and minds are together, Lord. Let your Spirit bless this meeting, inspire us and guide us. And Lord, give us everything that we need to build your kingdom in this place. Amen. Hello everyone. As I said, I'm Charlotte from St Catherine's Church. I've been asked to talk to you about the biblical imperative of mission. That's kind of a big scary term for me. It was way too much, but I just thought about why I engage and encourage everybody to engage in mission. What are the 2 words that Jesus used to say to everybody all the time? Apart from where's the wine? And are we having a party, please? Follow me. Jesus asked everybody, invited everybody, follow me. And it was an amazing invitation. But where did we follow Jesus? We followed him to the cross. We followed him to the empty tomb. We followed him into a new life and his kingdom here. But what does that look like biblically and for us today? Well, Jesus said quite clearly in the synagogue, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim the good news to the poor, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and to recover the sight of the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favour. What an amazing thing to say. And I'm so glad Luke wrote that down for us. But that wasn't Jesus's original thought. He actually quoted Isaiah, because that is word for word from Isaiah 61, verse 1. God's plan was always that the Spirit of the Lord would rest upon his people, to anoint them and to proclaim the good news to the poor, to set captives free, to recover the sight for the blind, and to just build his kingdom where we are. So if we are followers of Jesus, if we are truly his disciples, this is where we are following him, into this mission. And this good news, this proclamation, is the fact that where you are right now is not where you have to stay. We, as Jesus's people, can show them a path to a new way of living, an alternative reality. And that alternative reality is his kingdom. So SRGs actually fits in beautifully with this proclamation Jesus made for his disciples to follow him. We are going to be given the power and the authority and all the tools that we need through the Senma and through the Holy Spirit, primarily through the Holy Spirit, to live out this mission alongside Jesus and all of his disciples all over the world. And through our hands, another brick will be laid in building the kingdom of God where we are. And I like that. So, amen.
Okay, so I was just going to add a little bit to that, but I'm not sure I can. So if you need any sort of ammunition to persuade people in your churches, the sort of this imperative and that it needs to be done, I found some numbers for you. So there are more than 500 verses in the New Testament on the topic of the poor and the rich. And I'm going to put my glasses on now because I can't remember the numbers now. Oh yes, and that's 1 in 16. And there are 1 in 10 verses in the Synoptic Gospels are about the rich and the poor, and in Luke it's 1 in 7. So apart from it being the first thing Jesus talked about in his 3 years of mission, it's clear that all the way through the Bible it's a really big issue. So that's something to sort of take on board when people think that social action and this sort of thing is not important. It's definitely right at the very heart of what God wants to do. And there's loads of Christian writers who've written about it. And there's one who you may know, Jim Wallace, who's an American anti-poverty Christian campaigner. And he says that conversion comes with a definite what for, so that we're saved not for just our own sake, but to do other stuff. And as Charlotte said, Jesus sort of wants us to build his kingdom here. And the Sermon on the Mount was where he describes the kingdom, and it's very practical. It's about issues like sexuality, violence, at the rich and the poor, all these things, and it's a very countercultural, and it still is today. But all this is daunting for a little church, you know, that has not got a very big congregation and you know, individuals in it who feel that they've got no skills or don't know much. And so I'm hoping that at the end of this sort of session that you'll see that starting a self-reliant group within your church is a really easy, straightforward, simple way to start building the kingdom and building the mission from there. And it doesn't take, you don't need any skills, you just need to be able to walk alongside people like Jesus did, and everything else sort of follows. And so, you know, we start with a big mission, build God's kingdom, go out and make disciples, all those things, but it's got to start with a small step. And I remember I had the privilege of going to Uganda early on in our journey with Purple Shoots with a group of members from our self-reliant groups. And I met one of the NGOs we met out there was doing the Ugandan equivalent of self-reliant groups there. And they had hardly any resources and there weren't many of them. And I said, how on earth are you managing this? And they said, we start with the little we have and we build. And I kind of think that for lots of small churches, the ones we've worked with, that feel that they they don't have any resources, but if you start something simple like this, you can build from that. And so yeah, that's the sort of I hope that's inspiring for you and encouraging that it's not a really complicated thing to embark on, and it's not really onerous, but it can be really, really positive for the people that it impacts.
Great. I'm going to just share a little PowerPoint with you, I think, to get us through the next bit of our presentation. Where's it gone? Oh, I'm on the wrong slide. Oh,
I hate it.
sorry. There we go. Let's go all the way back to the front, beginning. So, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what self-reliant groups are. So you've heard, why we think there's an imperative to do them. So let's talk about the kind of nuts and bolts. So at first glance, our groups can look similar to groups you find everywhere. We have community cafes, craft groups, gardening groups, kind of you name it. There are small groups of people kind of doing things. But what makes them really different than any other kind of craft group or gardening group or whatever is that there is a kind of set of principles by which they're run. And those principles are really empowering people to kind of take control of their own lives. So we work with every group to facilitate their kind of growing ownership over their group and its projects. So these are our principles. So collective power, trust, economic power, and sustainability. So what do we mean by those? So collective power, that every one of our groups operates collectively. So everybody in it has a say. It's the collective who has the power. The sort of weird thing to get your head around this is that these are not groups that we run. These would not be groups that you run. The power to determine what the group is and what it does rests entirely with the members of that group. Now, it can take a while to get group members to start kind of taking their own decisions, because many people are quite powerless in their own lives, and it's a bit of a switch. So the second aspect to this is that no self-reliant group stands alone. All of the SRGs are linked together, both in kind of small local networks, but also bigger national and international networks. You've heard about our trip out to Uganda. We also had a meeting a couple of weeks ago, getting groups from Leeds, Manchester, Bristol, Wales, and the Netherlands all together. This really allows them all to kind of share skills and inspiration, and knowing that they're part of something bigger really drives the SRG members to kind of create change. So trust. We need to trust the members of the self-reliant groups. We need to trust them to know what they want and how to do it. And that can be a bit of a long road, because people at the bottom of the economic pile are often not trusted. I mean, if you think about the way the benefit system works, that's incredibly untrusting. And so it's turning a lot of stuff on its head. So sometimes they can struggle to trust themselves. But everything that we do in helping people start up a self-reliant group is about helping them learn to trust themselves, to trust what they know about their communities, and to trust that the kind of solutions that they come up with to their own problems will always be better than a kind of externally imposed solution. So economic power, this sometimes freaks people out, but it's a really, really important kind of principle. Now, all of our groups save a tiny little bit of money. Could be anything from kind of 20p a week to £2 within our groups, depending on who they are. But they also do something enterprising. Now, that could be as tiny as making some little bits and bobs to sell to friends and family, keep the group in tea and coffee, or it can be much, much more. But it's really essential, because once you've got a little bit of money, you can do stuff. And when it's your own money, you can choose entirely what you do with it. And it's putting that kind of power back in people's hands and giving them the power to do something. So sustainability, we help all of our groups work towards sustainability. This means that they're not dependent on outside help or funding. Now, of course, they can always call on the network of other groups and supporters for help, but if they can operate independently, then they won't be dependent on, say, funding being withdrawn or anything. This, although it's quite a scary thing to achieve, once you've done it, it's a brilliant thing for a church, because you're not promising to be there to run a group for other people for years, for months and years. You're promising to help them get started, and, you know, maybe come and step back in if they're having any problems, but you're not promising to sustain them. You're promising to help them sustain themselves. So just as a sort of super quick kind of visual about what does a self-reliant group mean. So here are a few little pictures. So it's about the driving, it's putting people in the driving seats of their own lives. The SOAR is about skills. It's really important that they learn new skills, maybe from each other or from outside sources. Piggy bank is savings, sort of that gives them something to get started with. The £20 note, that's all about earning a tiny bit of money, even if it's like really tiny, it still makes a big difference. And this last picture of my horse and my pony and his little dog, his little goat friend, that is all about the power of friendship and support. That goat could never have eaten that tree without his little friend, the horse. You can do more if you do it together. And that is kind of the essence of self-reliant groups. So I'm going to hand back to Karen, and we can do some case studies.
Okay, so we've just got 2 or 3. I think it was easier if you have stories to understand how they work. So I love this picture of me because it just says everything about trying to run that group. I've just felt very out of my depth with them, but these were all a group of, they're all single mums, actually, quite disadvantaged. And in fact, we got the group from a housing association who'd run a sort of a group on finance for them, a sort of a short sort of, lots of these little courses are short, and then the group wanted to stick together and they didn't know what to do with them. So we said we would help them become self-reliant. So there's a couple of things to say about these. They had no confidence, thought they couldn't do anything. And when I first started working with that group, it was the time of the Cardiff Christmas market, where we always have a stall and sell products made by our group members. So I said to them, I brought a load of stuff and said, oh, just make some Christmas decorations, I'll sell them at the Christmas market. And they poo-pooed it a bit, said, oh, then nobody will buy what we make, what we do, you know, we can't do anything. But anyway, they made some stuff and little things, and I, you know, took them to the Christmas market and actually sold them all. And the next week I came back and I put £12 on the table and I said, that's your money. And they were absolutely amazed that, first of all, that somebody had bought what they'd made, and also that suddenly they had £12 that they didn't have before, and then they had choices. What should we do with it? So that was one thing. The other thing about the group was we started off meeting in a very expensive community centre, and then eventually we were allowed to, we found a church that would accommodate us. And the problem with that group was that they tended to meet late afternoon, early evening, and they were all single mums and brought their children with them, who were, many of them, very wild. And although my colleague and I took along activities for the children to do to try to distract them so that we could work properly with the mums, the activities lasted about 5 minutes, and then they were back to running riots around the church hall, which was a bit of a nightmare. And 2 or 3 weeks into this, the pastor of the church said to us, he didn't want to interfere, but would we like it if he ran a little children's club whilst this group was meeting? So, you know, I tried not to bite his hand off, but he started it. And initially it was for the children of the mums, and of course those children had no father figure. Suddenly there was a man, and he was running it like a normal Sunday school class, giving them Bible teaching, stories, songs, all that sort of thing. And well, there were 2 brilliant outcomes of that. The first one was that he invited them then, the mums, to services, and they went because they knew him. And that's, you know, they'd never been to a church before. And the second thing that happened was 2 or 3 weeks into him running this children's club, I arrived there to do the group, and there was a queue of children outside the church from the community who'd heard about this club and all wanted to join in. And that is what happens when we partner with churches. Something much bigger seems to happen, and that's why we want to do more of it.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about some community cafes. So down in the Vale of Glamorgan in South Wales, we work with 3 churches within about 20 minutes of each other. So the Bridge Between in Barry has a purpose-built new cafe space, and we helped first one group and then another charity set up the cafe there to run several days a week. About 15 minutes down the road, there's St Peter's in Roos, and they also have a new space, but funding issues meant that their kind of original plans for having kind of a commercial cafe had to be shelved. So we now have an SRG there, supported by Purple Shoot staff, that runs a cafe on Tuesdays. And the Gathering Place is sort of halfway in between them, in St Athan. That has an older building. It's got a tiny little kitchen and a space that can be used for a cafe. And they have just, supported by us, started a new community cafe on a Wednesday. So what have we done to support these cafes, and how has their proximity to each other helped? So training. We developed a little training course called How to Start a Community Cafe. We've run it for group members in 2 of the locations, but we've had attendees from all 3 places at once. So that's been great for them to reduce costs and build lots of relationships. And sharing has become a really big thing for those 3. So that's what I was talking about earlier about local networks. So because they're now doing some sharing of volunteers. That's always a big issue with running a community cafe. But they open on different days. And so it's been brilliant being able to kind of say, oh, can anybody help us out next Wednesday? And having somebody go, and they learn so much more from trying things out in different areas as well. So yeah, all these group members, they're telling us they're getting extra skills from sort of going and trying out working in each other's cafes. And we're also running regular meetings for the members of all 3 groups, so they can talk about ideas for menus, the issues they're having with their coffee machines, training, staffing, and they're also discussing some joint buying of kind of equipment and cash and carry orders. So it's become really, really clear to us that having a little network of local self-reliant groups, particularly when they're doing something similar, is really, really valuable. So it's a great way to promote learning, shares costs and shares expertise. The cafes are also amazing at working. They're a good meeting place for kind of a new group, just as they're starting out, you know, or just for having coffee and kind of taking the group kind of beyond just a group doing something into that kind of social space where they're really starting to kind of support each other. So they really support the starting of new groups. So I'm actually going to take you back in time, 2015, to one of our very first self-reliant groups, which is the Miss Tilly's Community Cafe. This was a pop-up cafe run by adults with a learning disability and their friends. So back in 2015, Laura came and her friend Claire. So Laura has Down syndrome, and her kind of long-term friend and carer, Claire, kind of had a chat with me because they'd done one little pop-up in a cafe, in like a church hall, just doing an afternoon tea, and they really, really wanted to do a regular cafe. So they'd found a church that would let them use the cafe on a Monday when it wasn't open as it normally was, and you know, it was just amazing kind of what happened. They started very, very small, just serving a bit of coffee and cake. But by the time COVID hit, they were opening 4 different cafes in different churches. And they did run the canteen for the South Wales Fire Service headquarters. They've now become sort of independent kick, and they have more than 40 adults with a learning disability and their families helping them to run cafes around Cardiff. But I want to tell you a couple of things about Miss Tilly's that really show what SRGs are about. So when they opened their cafes, Miss Tilly's became a real destination, particularly for lonely older people in the community. Because they weren't aiming to operate as a commercial cafe, they had loads of extra staff. So there was always someone available for a chat, and they became a real kind of force for tackling loneliness and isolation in the community. So that was kind of turning things on its head. So people with a learning disability whose potential for contribution gets written off, they became the service providers here. And when lockdown was partially lifted and 2 people could meet, Miss Tilly's members got back to it. Meeting in twos, they started taking baking orders from their regular customers, going to one of the cafe kitchens, baking, and then hand delivering cakes to their clients. So here again, you know, in a really dark time, they were kind of being a real light for other people. And, you know, they were the ones making the difference. And this was all kind of because of those principles I was talking about. So that kind of collective power, because they were working as a team, there were enough of them to really give support to the vulnerable and the community around them. And, you know, trust, you know, they were trusted by people in their community, and we trusted that group to know what they wanted to do. When they said they wanted to do deliveries to people, nobody said, oh no, you can't possibly do that. They said, okay, let's work out how to do it. Economic power. So because their group is an enterprise, they generated enough money. They actually did loads of activities over lockdown. You know, they because they had a bit of pot of money, they could do it. You know, they had the power to choose what they could do to respond when things went really wrong. So sustainability, because that group generates its own funds, makes its own decisions about what to do next. And now they're independent of us. We're still very good friends, but they are in charge of their own destiny. So let me pass you to, it might make the, no, have I missed one? I've missed one. Joyce, here you go.
Hi everybody. So this was a self-reliant group that was started when I worked for Church Action on Poverty, and it was at a church in Bury, North Manchester. And we started with 5 church members who were quite a diverse group, mainly brought together because they all wanted to, well, they all were isolated in the community, and they just wanted some structure in their lives, and to meet on a Friday morning for a couple of hours gave them that. So at first it was quite social, and then they started saving £1 a week, and they started buying materials with that money and making crafts, and they all did something different. One did crochet, one made all sorts of things with bottles and frames, another did artwork, another did knitting, and the church had a Christmas fair, and they decided to have a stall on the Christmas fair, and they raised a bit of money, which gave them more encouragement. And from that, they then started like making more stuff for sale. The church allowed them to meet cost-free. Normally the church would charge about 20 quid for a meeting room. Probably because they were all members, the church let them meet for free. But otherwise they would have had to meet in somebody's home. So that was a real advantage for them. 2 of them had disabilities and couldn't work. They were quite young. 2 of them were retired, and there were 4 women and 1 man. And the man was a refugee who'd lived in this country for quite some time, but he was from Rwanda. And just sharing in those meetings of stories from Rwanda, that helped him to explain about his past and sort of give him a group, a support network to talk to. And just generally, they all supported each other with what was going on in their lives. Now, after a few craft fairs that they took their stuff to and sold it, they thought, well, hang on a minute, the church has got a great big sports hall here. Why don't we see whether we can have our own craft fairs in the sports hall and charge £10 a table for other groups to come and sell stuff. And they did that. They investigated with the council. They got a license to have a fair. on I think it was something like 7 or 8 times a year, and they advertised to other groups and charged £10 a table, and they managed to raise money for the church roof fund. So that was their way of giving back to the church for letting them have a cost-free meeting room. And they had also been saving £1 a week, and they used to find that around Christmas time that gave them enough money to go out and have a lovely lunch together at a local garden centre. So that's Creative Flairs in Bury. So I think now we're handing over to myself and Karen. Karen, you go first. We're talking about the sort of people that can benefit from being in the Self-Reliant Group.
Okay, we'll whiz through these just to give you an idea that every church and every situation is different. You'll have different needs in your community. So we wanted to try and give you an idea of the range of people that SRGs could work for. So I picked out, we haven't got pictures of all of them actually, which is a shame. But this group here, they're in Port Talbot, which is quite an economically deprived community. The women in this group, they all do sewing stuff. And they actually, in this picture, they partnered with the lady in the front there, who is a professor at the university and had developed what she's holding, which is called the Hug, which is I'm not allowed to call it a toy, but that's really what it is. But it basically does hug you, a big thing and it's for people in advanced stages of dementia. The university needed a small number made, and the cost of doing that was huge with any commercial maker. So this little group agreed to do it for them. So they made 40 of these things, and which were provided to the university, and everybody got a certificate at the end of it, but which was great, and they were thrilled with that because some of them hadn't got any sort of qualification before. Oh, there's our colleague of mine in the back. One of them, this lady on the left of the photo, she's now self-employed. So there were different outcomes as well, depending on the different people. This is a very straightforward craft group in Barry. So there's mixed ages, so that obviously craft appeals to largely women. But we get quite a cross section of ages from really quite young to quite old. And again, it depends on the community. We do have some men. We've got a few woodworking groups. I sometimes feel it's harder for men because often they're under more pressure to apply for jobs and so on. But we've certainly got 2 or 3 groups. And for men, isolation is a big issue too. And somehow it's harder for them to engage in some of the support groups that are out there that appeal to women. So if they're in a self-reliant group and they're doing something productive, it works well because they're able to talk more when they're busy. So that's the same group.
You should also mention with the men's group, we often gather more of relatively recently bereaved men.
Oh yeah.
So that's been a real feature of one of our woodworking groups. That it's been a real opportunity for them to, I don't think any of them would have necessarily gone to something officially described as a bereavement group, but they'll go to a woodworking group, and if it just happens that there are other men there who are also recently bereaved, they can really lean on each other.
Yeah, good point. This is our group of ladies with physical disabilities. A lady on the left came with us to Uganda, and she is a wheelchair user. And when her social worker had to go and leave for taking her, so she can't possibly do that. And we said that, she's decided her decision. And she and I were the only ones that didn't get to Glammy stomach whilst we're out there. So I thought that we did well. But this group of women, they all have physical disabilities who and can't work, but they do. They make crafts together, and they're again they're mixed ages. And they also volunteer now to run other support groups. So Sarah works with, that's one on the left. She runs or co-runs a group for ex-addicts to design a course on how to deal with them as a volunteer. And they also run another group for people with recovering from stroke, or maybe people who aren't going to recover from stroke, very disabled people, and they help them do very simple crafts. So the groups kind of sometimes grow other groups or support other groups. And that can happen within churches as well, and which draws even more people in. as Miss Tilly, which we've spoken about before, but it can even include with additional needs, which is great because they're often marginalised, and this is, as Emma explained, a fabulous way of including them. And Joyce has done work with some more unusual ones. Oh, there's some there. Just to show we have some in our community cafe. But Joyce has done sort of work with some more unusual sort of groups of people, haven't you? Ex-offenders and asylum seekers and older people and things like that.
Yeah, so this group, the one of the ladies on the bench is 98. So this is a group of ladies in a sheltered housing complex in Old Trafford in Manchester, and they have been saving £1 a week and using the money to go on social trips together. And they make cakes for the residents and the residents' meetings every week. So they're still going strong. And this is a group, they're called Women of Skills, and they're a group of asylum seeker ladies they meet every other week, and they make crafts, and they sell them whenever they can at craft fairs. They're not allowed to earn any money, so the money has to go to a charity, and what they can get is free transport to the meetings. So the money they earn goes towards the transport to the meetings. And this is a group of migrants from the EU who could earn money, and they were just cooking for a social event there. They came together, the group of Spanish men and women, and their dream was to open a cafe, and they're now a community interest company. And this was a group of homeless men, and we met them at a hostel where it was a drop-in centre, and they had wanted to be able to cook their own food. Where they lived, they had to have what was just provided for them at a homeless shelter. So we enabled them to have the use of a community centre, and then they started their own Sunday lunch group called Sunday Roast, providing free or pay as you can afford meals for the community on a Sunday. I think it's from us.
Oh yes, yeah. One thing I forgot, which actually is another thing that works well with groups, so that we're going to start doing shortly with Charlotte in Potter's Creek, is working with parents of young children. We've realised that when there are mums and toddlers, they go to mums and toddler groups, and then when the children go to school, those mums lose that little network of support. So we are planning to start some new groups using amongst those people to try to maintain that support and help them, because very soon a lot of the mums will then be under pressure to work as well. so this helps them share skills, develop skills, and move in a positive direction once their children have started school. So the Port Talbot one at the beginning with the other crazy unruly children was a little bit like that. But yeah, we're going to do some.
Right. So, Felicity, do you want to maybe pop us into the breakout room so we can have a bit of a chat? You're on mute.
Sorry. So I think, Jess is going to pop us into breakout rooms in a minute. And in these breakout rooms, we've got, how long have we got? About half an hour, 25 minutes, half an hour, to talk about, are SRGs something you think would work in your context, in your church or in your community? And if so, what are the needs, what are the resources, what partnerships or other possibilities are available? So yeah, we're going to talk more about your local context in these groups in a bit more detail, and we can think about how SRGs could work there. So Jess, if you're able to, could you put us into breakout rooms, and we'll come out of breakout rooms, shall we say at about 2:10?
Yeah, can do. I'm just signing up now. Okay, so basically, if you are interested in pursuing self-reliant groups in your church, we've done a little leaflet that kind of sets out what they are and what kind of involvement a church needs to have to be able to do them in your church. Have a bit of a think. If you think it might work where you are, then ideally you need kind of 2 volunteers. As sort of previously discussed, we think it works best if we can have 2 or 3 churches in a local area kind of joining together, because it's a great opportunity to be able to like share resources, share staff, share space, time and money. So it makes it much easier to work together. We are going to be running some training. We're going to do an in-person training day on the 4th of October. And there is the option to stay on for our peer gathering, so to meet people from loads of different groups on the 5th of October. That will probably be in South Wales. There will be follow-up training to that with quite a bit of online stuff. Anybody who signs up will be getting a mentor to kind of help them deliver things. Basically, Church Action on Poverty have been really generous and are going to fund the first 12 churches to do this. So it'll be free if you're in the first 12. But there will be quite a bit of kind of training and kind of ongoing support. The whole purpose, the whole thing about SRGs is about that kind of network, that it's never like leaving people on their own to do stuff. So we will work really hard to help network any groups you set up in the existing network, as well as joining any new facilitators up with our existing network of people who do facilitation. So we will send you your leaflet, have a bit of a think. I think, Joyce, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you've covered everything, Emma. I think after this, we were just going to throw everything open for questions for the last 15 minutes. Is that okay?
Have you got a link or anything for people to sign up for that training in October? Otherwise, I can send it around when you do have one.
I think it's on the leaflet.
Oh, okay, brilliant.
So yeah, you just need to email Joyce if you might be interested. But all of her contact details are on that leaflet. And yeah, we'd really like to kind of start the next stage in the revolution. Get people able to kind of take control of things and really bring that kind of engine for change inside churches, so that we're really kind of driving it on together. Right, any questions?
It's more just for information after today, and if CAP National is in communication with any groups in the northeast of England, then it would be interesting to know that, and I'll certainly raise it at Church Action in Poverty's Northeast meeting. We meet consistently every month and take it from there, because we obviously can't engage very easy. We need a passport to get into South Wales. Anyway, could I just add one bit, which is nothing to do with SRGs, but what I've kind of followed recently, and I don't know whether yourselves link into it, but I did actually learn, we've been up here, been interested in the unconditional basic income, UBI, as they call it, and we had a workshop on that. But the thing that inspired us coming from Wales is that the Welsh government now actually have an experiment of young people who are leaving care get an unconditional basic income of £1,600 a month. I assume you're aware of that.
Yeah.
So in some ways, you know, it'd be interesting if there's any kind of connection between yourselves and what I think is jargonized as the wraparound service. You know, that I think that's what the Welsh people call it. You know, is there any links between yourselves and that initiative? Because Jarrow, which is up in the northeast here, is just about to be, you know, an experiment of 16 young people will be on UBI outside of Wales. You know, so it's quite a big move, and there's a lot of, anyway, I'm just saying kind of a wee bit of a connection between, you know, self-reliant groups, you know.
The politicians have spoken to us about it, but beyond that, we're not linked into it.
No.
Yet. But they do. They have, you know, they asked for our view beforehand, and yeah, they have been talking to us, but we're not actually connected into it yet.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm just mentioning that because if there's anything that you are linked, then it would be useful for us to know here, because there's going to be an experiment in the Jarrow, which is part of the northeast region, where FIC CAP northeast covers that part. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Anything else?
Sorry,
I
Nikki,
also,
you go ahead.
sorry. Can I also ask?
No, I was just going to invite you to speak.
Oh, thank you, Joyce. Thank you. The really generous support for the first 12 churches. What does that look like? Is that, you know, covering them to come to that training in October and kind of be coached along the process? Is that what that is?
So that covers the cost of the training, which is, the first in-person one, plus I think 2 or 3 online ones, plus ongoing kind of mentoring and access to our library of resources for the first year. It doesn't include any transport or accommodation.
Yeah.
So you would have to cover that yourselves for that first kind of in-person bit, but obviously the rest of it's all online, so there won't be any of those ongoing.
Brilliant, thank you. And also we talked a little bit in our breakout room about people already maybe feeling overwhelmed with things that are going on, and perhaps being worried that this would be a lot of work to set up. Have you had any, what's your kind of advice on that, like opening the discussion about this to others, and, you know, helping them to not feel overwhelmed by the prospect of setting something up?
Well, I think the big thing for us is you are not making a kind of permanent commitment to be there forever, kind of helping a group. That the whole point of the exercise is, yes, it's a bit of work kind of up front, but that you're supposed to be withdrawing from that group. Although you can kind of remain there in the background, but so it shouldn't be a massive kind of permanent commitment. With the other stuff around kind of the setup, we have really quite an enormous amount of resources now about kind of training on how to do it, early sessions. So we're not talking about abandoning somebody here with a big difficult thing to do. Like there's a lot of stuff. Like we're currently working on our big kind of library of sessions, and we've got some that are like, if for example you started off with a craft group and then wanted to work to help them become more self-reliant, we've got a bunch of sessions about that. So you don't need to have any skills or knowledge, you could just download them and start doing them. We also do we also do things where we can teach people, so things like our how to start a community cafe course, we can deliver that remotely. So I think there is a small extra charge for that because it's obviously a person delivering a course to you, but there are kind of various ways of doing it that are not massively onerous. Also, you can just start one group, and if if you need to kind of rethink, have a go at doing something in a different way, you could do that. When the point of it is to use the resources that you've got. And if that is not very much, then that's fine. It's going to be maybe a bit different to another place that had more kind of time and resources. But fundamentally, it's supposed to work from very little. And it does work from really tiny amounts of stuff.
Yeah, it's just walking alongside people. It's just, you don't have to solve their problems. You don't have to fix them. You don't even have to teach them anything necessarily, because you'd be surprised what they already know.
Yeah.
So
and what they can teach each other.
And what they can teach each other, yeah. So that's one of the things we think should appeal to churches, but it's not a big deal to take it on.
Thank you.
Could I just ask, I was interested at the men's involvement, because I had some assumptions that SRGs were primarily women focused, and are there many in terms of the national picture where men are involved in that?
So there aren't masses of men's groups. There are a few mixed groups, and we've got 2 men's groups, but we've also got another couple of mixed groups. There are some mixed groups in Manchester, aren't there, Joyce? So I think it was originally started as more of a kind of women's movement.
Yeah, that's what I assumed. Yeah,
but we think it works. It can work just as well for men. Sometimes it works more easily for women. I mean, I don't want to kind of be stereotype people, but in general, like, women often want to kind of work collectively, and they kind of just crack on and do that. And sometimes men just need a little bit more help to start wanting to be cooperative with each other. But it does work. We have fewer mixed groups because we find that particularly when people are quite vulnerable, they quite like being they feel a bit safer in a kind of single sex environment. Like that's both men and women find it a bit easier to share some of the difficult stuff they're going through in a single sex environment. But again, that is up to the groups, and it's entirely down to a group whether they choose to be a single sex group, whether to make it an open group. It's also always up to the group whether they want to admit more people. So we've had some groups that are always kind of up for new members, and we've got some groups that say, no, we've got enough members right now, we don't want anyone else. But the point is that it's about what the people in the group choose, and that nobody else has the right to say, no, you must admit this person or that person, or you must not admit that person. It's got to be about something that's in their control. Any other questions? Well, we might wrap it up then. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Shall I pass it back to Felicity to finish us off?
Yeah, I've not really got much more to add, but yes, thank you everyone for coming, and we will send those leaflets around to you. I think if you've signed up through the Eventbrite, we should have your email address, and we'll make sure you get leaflets with more information and the details for signing up for the training in October. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.